Hi everyone. I'm going to be demoing this refresher course, as Chitra said. I'm going to be showing you it mainly using, entirely using C++ code. But if you're an assembler person, I'm sure you'll probably get something out of it, because a lot of what I'm going to show you, not all, but a lot of what I'm going to show you is applicable if you're debugging assembler as well. So we're going to start off with a short PowerPoint that will go over quickly what we're going to cover in this webinar. And after that, we'll just move straight on to, as you know, we're going to be debugging at the source code level. So I'm going to talk about loading a program briefly, and then we'll lock a program into source view ready for tracing, and we'll run it and step through some code. And I'm going to show you how to trace at the machine line level, and I'm going to show you the breakpoints view, call stacks, variables and watches, and we'll finish off by showing you source mode. There's a few topics which are kind of related to source view tracing that are more advanced and aren't going to be covered here, but I thought I'd draw your attention to them because we do actually have other demos on each of these topics, and some of them I'm going to touch on briefly but not go into detail on. So if you need to know more and delve further into some of these topics, you can go to our website and peruse and watch some of these other demos. So straight on with the demo itself. Okay, you can see here I've got zTPFGI open, and I have a project here called C program. And this is a program which has a number of C++ source files associated with it. So first thing I'm going to do is, this program is the one I'm going to use to demo. So first thing I'm going to do is just connect to a system. I'll click the connect button, and I'll just choose a system and go ahead and connect. Now I've already actually built this program, so I already have the SO ready for loading, and there are lots of different ways to load a program to the system ready for testing, but I'm not going to go into that. It's not really the topic of this webinar, but I'm just going to right click on the make file, and I'm going to say load. And the first thing that you're going to get is a load set creation dialog, and this allows you to set various parameters, like you can set the OLDR name, load set name, system to connect to, whether to activate automatically after load, and whether to load system-wide or selectively. What I wanted to actually draw your attention to, which is actually pertinent to this webinar, are these source view trace options. Now, just to warn you, this dialog does actually time out, and because I'm going to talk for a little bit about these options, it might time out, in which case I'll just have to bring it back again. So you select none. That means I want to load my load set, but I don't want to lock anything into source view for tracing. You might do that if you're not actually wanting to trace at the source code level, or if you want to choose later. And there goes the dialog, so let me just bring it back up again. And all, if you select all, that means load my load set, and all the source files that are associated with that load set, open them all in the editor and lock them all into source view ready for tracing. We also have a refresh option. This is useful for if you are in the midst of tracing, you've made a small change and you've just rebuilt and you want to just get back to where you were quickly. This will actually not ask you anything. It will just reload the load set and relock into view what you had locked into view before. And I'm going to actually choose select, and this actually allows you to select which source files you want to lock into source view. And it does this by, first of all, loading the load set. So you can see that the load set has gone ahead and loaded, and this is my load sets view, and the load set is here. And now I have this select members for source view trace dialog appear, which lists the various files in my load set. And you can see I've done this before because it knows that last time I did this I had these two files logged into source view, so it's gone ahead and it's just checked those for me, and I can check and uncheck as I see fit. I'm going to leave those as I want them, and I'm going to click OK. And you can see I've only got one file open in the editor, and that's going to be locked, and then it opens the other file and locks it. And what you can see here is you can tell a locked file because it has a lock symbol, and you can see the lock symbol here as well. And unlocked files don't have the lock symbol. So just to show you how, let me open this file in the editor without locking it, and I'll show you a bit more about how to lock and unlock files. So if you have a file that's open in the editor, as long as it is actually associated with a loaded and activated load set, you can just right-click it and you can say trace in source view, and you can see the lock symbol gets added. And likewise, you can remove it from source view trace just by a simple right-click. And you can do the same here. In fact, let me select two files. You can do more than one file at once, and I'll say trace in source view, and it's gone ahead and opened the file that wasn't open before. And I can also remove from source view. Similarly, for some reason it's not able to unlock a specific file. I'm not sure why that is, but I'm not going to use these two files anyway. And similarly, you can actually right click and you can say remove all from source view, which would remove everything from source view if you wanted to. So the importance of locking into source view is that in order to trace a file, you do need to have it locked into source view. Any file that isn't locked into source view, you won't be able to step into that file and trace that file. And later on in the webinar, we will actually come back to that topic, and I'll show you. So now that we've talked about locking the file, let's go ahead actually and run our test program. And I have it where I've run it before, so I'm just going to click a button, and it's called zAPE4. And I want to draw your attention to some things. Firstly, you can see that the entire desktop layout has changed. We have 4 new views. We have a watches view, a call stack view, a variables view, and a breakpoint list. And for these views, if in your layout for some reason one of these views isn't showing and you want it to show, for example, if I can't see the breakpoint list, up here, the other thing that I was going to draw your attention to is the Debug tab. This is a new tab which has just appeared, and it only appears while you're source view tracing. If you're not source view tracing, the Debug tab disappears again. And under the Debug tab, this houses all the different controls that you need for source view tracing. And under this we have a section called Debug Views, and you can see we've got variables, watches, call stack. So as my breakpoints view isn't showing, I can just click this button and it's back again, and you can do that with any of the views. So yeah, so the other thing I'd like to show you is the actual editor itself, and this file in the editor. What you can see has happened is that when I ran the program executed until it hit the first locked file. And so the execution has stopped at the first executable line of the first locked file. So what you see here is any executable line of code has a blue dot next to it. Lines of code that aren't actually executable don't. So you can see that we've entered this program APE4 and we've stopped at the first executable line of code. And this is denoted by a little blue arrow and this salmon pink color of the actual line. And the line hasn't actually executed yet. This is the line which is about to be executed. Let's take a closer look at the Debug tab, and let's have a look at these source view execution buttons. And let's look at them one at a time and see what each one does. So at the moment, you can see that we're stopped and we're just about to enter a function called do additional test 1. This just a little bit about this program. This is a test program. It's sort of not all that important what the program's doing, but it is a test program just to be able to show you the capabilities of zTPFGI and how you can source trace. So as I say, it's sort of fairly nonsensical what it actually does. But so we're going to step into this do additional tests 1, and if I click step into, what happens is it does what it says and it actually steps into that function. So I'm just going to go ahead and click step into. And here we are. We're inside do additional tests 1, and we've stopped at the first executable line of code in do additional tests 1. So the next button I'll show you is step out. And what step out is going to do is it's actually going to execute this entire function, and then it's going to return from the function and take us to the next executable line of code after this function is completed. So I'll just hit step out, and you'll see we've gone past do additional tests 1 and we're now ready to execute the next line of code. And as I say, the whole of do additional test 1 did in fact execute as well. In comparison to step into and step out, I'm going to show you step through, because what step through does is it'll actually execute this do additional tests 2 and just move directly on to the next executable line here. We're not going to see it go into it and then come out of it. We're not going to trace inside that function at all. So I'll hit step through, and as you can see, we've executed test 2 and we've just moved directly on to the next function. So the next one I'd like to show you, I'm actually going to step into do additional test 3, I think, to show you the next few buttons. So this do additional test 3, it has a class called zRollerDex, and it's got a variable of class zRollerDex here, and then it does a few different things. But what this function actually does is that it adds customers to a Rolodex. So it's a bit of a fun thing with that. We're adding JF Kennedy and we're adding Richard Nixon. So it's a little bit of a fun thing going on here. But what I want to show you is, first of all, the run button. And I'm just going to set a breakpoint, because what run does is it runs to the next breakpoint. So as you can see here, all I did to set the breakpoint, I'm just going to do that again, is wherever I want my breakpoint, I just go ahead and I just click on the blue dot, and it turns into a slightly larger red dot, and the line turns blue, and that shows I've got a breakpoint set there. So I'll just hit run, and I've gone to the breakpoint. And the other thing that you'll see, I mean, I'll come back and look at the variables view a little bit more later, but you can see immediately that any variables that have actually, where the values have changed, they're highlighted in bright red so that you can easily see what's changed. And I'll show you run to cursor next. So run to cursor, rather than running to a breakpoint, with the run button, if you haven't got a breakpoint, it'll run and it'll actually just run to completion if there's nothing there to stop it. With run to cursor, I can actually go and I can put my cursor on a line and I can say run to cursor, and it will execute until it reaches the line with the cursor on. So you can see that now my current execution point is on the line where my cursor is. And the next thing I'll show you here is branch to cursor. I'm going to put my cursor on another line again, and I'm going to click branch to cursor, and you'll see my execution point jumps to where the cursor is. So the question is, what's the difference between run to cursor and branch to cursor? And the difference between run to cursor and branch to cursor is that for run to cursor, when we moved from there to where my cursor was, we actually executed the intervening lines of code. For branch to cursor, you're not actually executing the intervening lines of code. You're literally jumping from one location to the next. This can be useful when you're debugging, because sometimes when you're stepping through, you want to skip certain lines of code. So it's a useful feature to have, but you do need to bear in mind that when you use branch to cursor, if you're not sure what you're doing, it could have some funny effects on your program. So looking back up at this Debug tab, another good thing to show you is the machine trace. So I'm just going to turn on, so far you've seen that I'm stepping through the code line by line, and sometimes I'm stepping into functions and stepping out. But if I turn on machine trace, just by clicking this button here, you can see that this new machine trace window has opened, and it actually shows some machine line details. Now if I step, you can see the actual line, my execution point, hasn't moved because I'm still on that particular line of code. But if you look down here at the machine trace, you'll see that the details are changing as I step through the machine lines. And to turn off machine trace, you just need to go back up and just, it's a toggle button, you just toggle it off again. The machine trace disappears, and now if I say step, I'll just step out of this. I seem to have a host side error. Okay, it just didn't like me doing that, so the test program wasn't that keen on me doing that. But I think this is actually not going to do anything for me now. Let me actually reset this and start and run the program again. Let me just exit the ECB and start again. I'll just run the program again. Okay, so I mean, I've shown you most of these buttons. The only other things are, you just saw me use exit ECB, which basically just gets you right out of the ECB straight away. Exit all ECBs. This will, if you've got multiple ECBs running at once, this will exit all of those ECBs at once. And reset terminal, that can be used to remove all ECBs for the specific terminal and reset the terminal ready for new inputs. And run no trace, this will actually run the entire program to completion, and it won't stop even if you have a breakpoint set. So for example, I have a breakpoint set here. I can hit run no trace and the entire program will run to completion, and you see it. This is just a message which says that there isn't actually any output to write to the terminal for this particular program. Okay, so we've had a look at the different debug buttons, and we've had a look at tracing at the machine lines level. Let's actually take a closer look at the different views. So let me just run our little program again, and we'll take a look at the different views. Okay, I'm going to step into this Do Additional Tests 1 program. And I'll start off by showing you the variables view. And what you can see here is that the variables view has a locals tab which shows all the local variables, and at this tab I don't think there'll be anything in this at the moment, no, but this is really pertinent to C++, and it shows you all the variables that belong to this particular. So what can you do with the variables view? Well, you've already seen that if a variable changes, it's highlighted in red. You can also drill down. Let me just actually just run a little bit so some of these variables actually are populated. Okay, so you can see that Kennedy is now, what we've done here is we've added a customer called John F. Kennedy, and he's at index number 3 in our Rolodex. So that's what we've done there. So you can see here that he's now index number 3. And we can click this plus sign and we can drill down, and you can see that in Rolodex 1 we have 2 best customers and all our customers and our customer count. So we can drill down and we can see who the first of our 2 best customers is, for example. The other thing that we can do is, if we wanted to, we could actually, sometimes when you're tracing a program, it's useful to see how your program will behave with a different value, and you can do that using the variables view. So, for example, Kennedy is at index 3, the Kennedy index is number 3. Let's just change that to 6. We only have 4 names in our program, so it's probably not a good idea to change the index to 6, but let's do it anyway. So you can see here that I've changed the index of Kennedy to 6. Now, and then we could run the program, and it probably won't be happy about that. But the other thing is that you can actually do the same sort of thing to view the variables. You can't change the variables in the editor itself, but you can view the variables simply by hovering your mouse over. So, for example, if I wanted to look at Rolodex 1, you can see that Rolodex 1 has popped up, and I can just hover over the plus sign to drill down, and I can drill down further into my 2 best customers, and I can take a look at the first of my customers and the full name of that customer, and I can even go down further if I wanted to. So you can drill down, and if I just, similar with a simple variable, let's mouse over Kennedy, and you can see that Kennedy's, the value of the Kennedy index is 6. There's more to say on the variables view, and there are other webinars which go into a lot more depth on this, but I wanted to show you the watches next. And we have 4 different tabbed watch windows actually, and so you can actually group watches into these different sections. And the benefit of the watches is that you can more easily keep an eye on a variable. So, for example, with this Rolodex 1, I've drilled down here, and let's say I wanted to keep an eye on the first of my 2 best customers, and I wanted to keep an eye on their full name. I can add a watch. So I can just right-click here, and I can, from the pop-up menu on the right-click, I can say Copy to Watches. And from that point, there's a lot less drilling down to do. I can easily keep an eye on what that particular variable is. And you can actually do the same thing from the editor as well. So using Kennedy again, let's stick with the Kennedy index. If I wanted to keep a watch on what the Kennedy index is, I can right-click it and I can say add watch at cursor. So it's where my cursor position is, and I'm adding a watch for the variable that is at the cursor. And there you can see that Kennedy is 6. And now as I step through, these will turn red along with the variables, and they'll all change along with the variables. And the next thing to show is the call stack. Let's have a look at the call stack. So the call stack shows you where you are in the program and where you've been in the program. So you can see that we started at APE4 and then we went into do additional tests 1. And if we were deeper in, of course the call stack would go a bit deeper. And you can actually double click on these items to navigate. So if I double click on APE4, that takes me to APE4, and I can go back to additional tests just by double clicking in the call stack. So it's a convenient way of navigating where you've come from in your code. Next thing to show you, I'd like to show you the breakpoints. So I'm just going to make this breakpoints window a little bit bigger, and just so that I've got a few more to play with, I'm just going to randomly add a few breakpoints to this file. And one of the things about breakpoints is that you can actually right-click on a breakpoint to get more information. So as you can see, you can enable breakpoints and you can access the properties. And you can, let's start with the properties. So you can see that this breakpoint I've clicked on, it tells you information about the file location, tells you what line number it's on, which is 232, and it tells you a group. And here it says that it's enabled. And to disable the breakpoint, I can just uncheck it and say OK, and that disables the breakpoint. Let's just actually disable this breakpoint. Another easy way of disabling it is here I've got breakpoint enabled directly on the breakpoint itself, so I don't have to go to properties, and I'm just going to say toggle it, and that's a toggle. So now that's disabled. So you can see that it's grey and it's got a little white cross in it. So and the actual line colour, it has turned green. So now when I hit run, normally speaking it would have stopped at the next breakpoint, but because this breakpoint is disabled, we're going to go straight through to the next breakpoint. And so there we are at the next breakpoint. You can see that you couldn't see before that one was disabled because it had the blue arrow across the top of it, but now you can see that that one too is disabled. And if we look over at the breakpoints list, you can see disabled breakpoints are unchecked, enabled breakpoints are checked. So another easy way to enable and disable them is to just check them and uncheck them. Let's see which. So this one's on line 246. So if I uncheck that one, you'll see it go grey and come back again. So the other thing, and also you can I've shown you how you can right-click on the breakpoint itself and access its properties. And you can also come here and you can enable all breakpoints at once, and you can disable all breakpoints at once. Enable in file, this will enable all the breakpoints in a particular file, but won't touch breakpoints in another file. And disable in file will disable all of the breakpoints in a specific file. And clear deletes all the breakpoints. And you'll notice that I skipped over enable and disable group which aren't available at the moment, but I am going to show you them next. So all these things you can also do by right-clicking in the breakpoints list as well. And the reason that enable group and disable group is not available at the moment is because there aren't currently any groups. So I'm just going to add this particular breakpoint to a group. So I've got this breakpoint, and I'm just going to call it group 1. And being able to, if you like working with breakpoints a lot and you're using a lot of breakpoints, actually using groups to group your breakpoints is a quite a useful feature for controlling your breakpoints in an easy way. So you can see under this group column now we have group 1, and now if I right click, you'll see that I can enable group 1 and I can disable group 1, and I can multi-select if I wanted to, and I could add some let's go into properties, and I can add these to group 1 too. Now you can see that I've got 3 different breakpoints all in group 1. Now let me just go and say enable group 1, and you can see that all the breakpoints in group 1 are now enabled. Before they weren't in sync, this one is enabled, those two weren't, but now that I've said enable the entire group's enabled. And I can do the same thing. I can say disable group, and I can just disable the whole of group 1. And if I wanted to, I could create a group 2 and a group 3, and I could have different breakpoints in the different groups, and I can enable and disable them as needed. And clear, I didn't want to show you clear before because I didn't want to delete them all, but I can hit clear and that just deletes all the breakpoints in all my files. Okay, so that's actually most of what I wanted to show you, but the next thing I wanted to show you is source mode. Now, source mode is actually a very useful feature. Now, you might remember that I mentioned earlier that in order to source view trace a file, that file has to be locked for source view. Any files that are not locked don't get traced. So let me just illustrate this quickly. I'm going to take this APE4CA1, and this file, if we look over here at the outline, you'll see that this file has the definition for the class C Rolodex, and it has add customer and get customer and a few other things. So I'm actually going to right click this and I'm going to say remove from source view trace, and I'm then going to come here and I'm actually going to I want to start again with this, so I'm just going to run no trace and run this program again actually. So, okay, so I'm back to do additional test 1. I'm going to step in to do additional test 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just set a breakpoint and run as far as that breakpoint. And what I want to show you is Rolodex 1, which is the C Rolodex type. This line of code here, this is going to get the customer Kennedy, and then it's going to add customer Richard Nixon. So we're going to go do 2 things. We're going to step in to get customer, and we're going to add the customer. And normally speaking, but before when I did this, if I did click to step into, I would, because this file CA1 was locked into source view, I would have stepped into it, and that would have been fine. But now I'm going to hit step into, so I'm not stepping through, I'm stepping into. But as you can see, I haven't stepped into that file at all. And this is because the file isn't locked. And as we know that this is the file that contains the functions we want, we could easily come here and we could lock the file, and next time we did that, all would be good and we'd step into here. But what if we were in a position of not actually knowing what our file is and what file we want to step into? We're not sure what to lock. Let's do this again. I'm going to hit run no trace and do this again, and I'll show you it with source mode. Okay, so let's go back to where we were again quickly, and let's step into do additional tests and run to my breakpoint. Okay, so this time I'm going to, again in the Debug tab, I'm going to come here and I'm going to click this button which says source mode. And so now that that's highlighted, you can see that source mode is turned on. And what this is actually going to do is, when I say step into, zTPFGI will go away and it will find the file that I want to step into. It will open the file in the editor and it will lock it into source view. So I don't actually need to know what file I'm looking for. So let me just do this. I'm just going to hit step into. And there you have it. It's gone away. It's found APE for CA1. It's locked it, and I've stepped into it. And here I am in Get Customer. And if I step out to Get Customer, I can then go ahead and step into Add Customer, as you might expect. So that's actually a very useful feature to have. Now, the only last remaining things I wanted to show you in this is one, how to access the ECB window. We have here in the Debug tab again a button which takes you to your active ECB. If you have more than one ECB, you can get them from the drop-down list. So I'm just going to go ahead and click this button, and you can see, as expected, you can have access to your ECB window. And this is, there are webinars on tracing at the macro instruction level and about the ECB window that you can watch if you wanted to know more about this. And the other thing is that trace options are also available from here. So if I wanted to set any trace options to stop at in addition to the source level, I can do that. So for example, let me set all macros. So now that I've set all macros, let me take source mode off as well. Otherwise I'll be stopping in places I don't really want to stop. Okay, yeah, so I've set all macros now. So now if I hit run, as soon as I hit a macro, I will stop, and the ECB window will automatically open for me. Yeah, let me hit run again because I think that was stopping at a breakpoint. Okay, yeah. And so now you can see that I've stopped at a macro, and the ALC window's opened for me. And if I want to return to source view, I can set no macros, and I can step again, and I'll come back in, and I'll stop in source view again. And so that's pretty much all I wanted to show you, except for when I hit run no trace, this program will complete. And if you remember, when I was showing you source mode, this file was automatically opened and locked by source mode. And what happens, zTPFGI, any files that were automatically opened and locked, when we run to completion, those files, the work area gets tidied up. Those files are automatically unlocked and closed for you. so that they're not cluttering up your space. That's pretty much all I wanted to show you. I haven't sort of covered assembler specifically, but a lot of the features of and the basic principles of stepping through and source view tracing are similar in both. So can I open the floor to any questions?
Thanks, Vala. That was a very informative session. The session is open for questions. You can either click on the hand raise symbol or you can send a chat message to the organizer. So you'll be unmuted to get your answers clarified in person. The session is open for your questions now. Bob, you're unmuted.
I just wanted to clarify that I'm assuming that in the demo you're running a newer version of the client than what we have here at Travelport. Everything looks a lot different and I can't get certain things to display and such.
Hi Bob, actually this is a newer version which is yet to release in many of the clients actually. It is not released in Travelport for now.
Okay.
But we plan to release this one at the earliest. Actually, we are actually right now testing in the client environment.
Question is from Satish. The question is there a way to trace library and header function?
Yes, well. No, not directly. We don't have any direct way to trace the header files, but the only way is there is one way to trace the inline instructions of the macros with the machine trace option, but there is no other way to trace the header files directly.
Satish, you're unmuted. Does that answer your query?
Yes, thanks.
Thanks, Satish. Thanks, Praveen. The next question is from Billy. The question is, when you turned on macro trace, was there any indication that anywhere that it's turned on?
Yes, there is. Let me just run it quickly and I'll just show you. In source view, it is slightly subtle, but when I change it, you can see that the all macros button is pressed when I did all macros. So anything where there's where the trace options are set, the button will actually be down for that trace option. Now, in this, it's a drop-down menu, so it's more difficult to see. When the actual ECB is open, if you were actually, say, looking at the ECB view, you can see it down here in the button bar down here, and also for tracing the ECB, we also have this trace tab, and you can see that the buttons are highlighted if there is a trace set for the various things in there as well. So yeah, there is an indicator. I guess in source view mode, you would have to drop down to have it, but you can drop down the menu and have a quick glance just to remind yourself if you needed to.
Billy, you're unmuted. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Billy. Thanks, Viola. Dinah, you're unmuted.
Thank you. In source mode, could you please explain one more time how you indicate what you want it to track for you? That just wasn't clear to me. Thank you.
In source mode.
Yes.
The thing with source mode is simply it's quite simple in that if you want to trace a particular file, the file has to be locked. So what I was showing was stepping into a file. If you remember, stepping into steps into a function. So if that's the function that you're stepping into, let me just run to this breakpoint. So if the function that you're, sorry, I've got this turned on now. If the function that you're stepping into is in a different file, so if I've got a file locked in source view and I want to step into a function that is not locked into source view, that will not happen, normally speaking. But in source mode, with source mode turned on, it will happen. So it's just a simple thing of stepping from one file into another file, and you haven't got that second file locked. Source mode will do it for you anyway.
When you say file, you mean program?
No, I actually mean source file. So they can correspond to one another. In ASM, I think there's more of a correspondence between them. But if we look at this project view, for example, I've got this one APE4 program, but it has different source files associated with it.
Okay.
But in assembler, I think it can mean into a different program. So if you've got one assembler file and you want to step into another, it'll work in the same way. So from one segment to another, I guess you could say as well.
Oh,
yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, no problem.
While I see a question from Billy, the question is, with the source mode on, will it source view into a program that was not loaded by GI?
With source mode on, will it source view into a program that was not loaded by GI?
Loaded by
Billy, let me answer that question. If you are not loaded the segment, then it will actually get locked. The segment which is loaded from the system, or which might be in the base or the system-wide loaded segment. Billy, whether that answered your question?
Billy, you're unmuted.
I think the answer that I heard was yes. It'll just load. It'll bring up source trace into a program out of the base.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you. So is there any advantage to loading it and versus letting the system just go get what you want?
Yes. In case of C and C++ program, the code which is loaded in the base is optimized. So that will make a big difference when you do load it from your load set.
Oh, sorry, I'm muted on my end.
Okay.
On the watch screen or window, is there a way to view multiple of the watch tabs at the same time, or is it just a single watch tab at a given time?
It's a single watch tab at a given time, I'm afraid.
While I think we can actually use multiple watch tabs here. While can you select the watch 2?
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like if you selected the watch 2 and add a variable to watch, then it will get added to the second table. You can try that one.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I misunderstood the question on that. I thought you meant sort of view them side by side. But yeah.
Actually, because I'm assuming each tab can have separate things to watch.
Yes,
right?
let me just add Nix into
And yeah, my question was, can I view watch 1 and watch 2 at the same time?
I mean, Praveen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you'd have to actually tab between the different sets of watches.
Bob, let me explain you a little bit more. If we have different variables or different variables which we added in watch 1 and watch 2, if you just want to look and you can actually swap the screen and look, both screens will get updated. This is just for user's reference where we can have a different watch sets.
Yeah, I understand. You can switch, you can click on them. I was just wondering if there's a way to drag it so that you could see both at the same time.
Yeah, I can understand that. I guess one issue with that would be the actual sort of real estate of having lots of things, lots of windows. But it's a good thought.
Well, that's why 224-inch monitors on my desk is a good thing to have and to use the real estate.
Sure, yeah.
Too bad.
Yes, that would be good.
Diana, you're unmuted.
If you're in source mode and you hit an enter into another program, but you didn't load it to trace it in assembler, will it bring it in for you and trace it?
Yes, it will.
Oh, wonderful. Can you step to that enter and then turn source mode on?
Yes, you can actually, if you are in the enter macro, then you can enable the source mode on, then it will get it will bring up the next program, so that it actually gets automatically locked for the source utility so that you can trace.
Thank you once again for joining this session. Have a great day ahead. Thank you.